All right, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us here today. My name is Bryan Ashton. I serve as Chief Strategy and Growth Officer for Trellis and head of our Trellis Strategies team. Trellis is a nonprofit organization located a little north of Austin in Round Rock, Texas. We've been in higher education for 47 years and have had the opportunity to work with many institutions across the country through our work with both the operating nonprofit as well as our Trellis Foundation, who have been great partners in the work and in our webinar here today. We're really excited to host a series of conversations here throughout 2026 that are targeted on building on some momentum that we had from a conversation last year at our inaugural Modern Learner Summit. And this work is really driven by what we are referring to as the modern learner and thinking about how we can best support these students as post-secondary education and training changes fairly rapidly. And so when we think about modern learners, there's two key concepts that we think about. The first is that they increasingly consume education and training in a nonlinear fashion. So they start, they stop, it comes in and out of their lives, but it isn't finish high school, go on, get additional training, and then enter the labor workforce and remain employed. It's rather we're starting and stopping and getting additional training as we need to, and we only see that trend accelerating as we look at a rapidly changing workforce that we're working with and employer needs. The second is that when people start and stop post-secondary education, they come to us with a variety of other personas or, kind of competing priorities. And so if we think about historical student success literature, a lot of that is grounded in this idea of you are a student, you come to a campus, your primary priority is being a student and learning. We know from work that we've been able to do with learners across the country that they are working full time, they are caregivers, they are responsible for any number of obligations outside of just being a student. And we have to figure out how we can make all of these components of our life fit together to be able to achieve the promise of post-secondary education for these learners. And so with that, we're really, really excited to, like I said, kind of highlight some of these great models that we're seeing across the state of Texas and across the country to support modern learners. And today we are talking about this idea of integrating durable skills into continuing education programs. And so we've seen a continued growth in CE programs. We're seeing kind of continued appetite from learners to engage with these programs. And so we have two great panelists here with us today. So first, Dr. Vincent Solis from Brazosport College has been a phenomenal leader, and we've been so closely watching the work that has happened at Brazosport and huge admirers of the work that you've been able to do, and really excited to have you with us here today. And then Tim Taylor, who's co-founder and president of America Succeeds, which is another model that we had a chance to highlight at our Modern Learner Summit last year in Austin. And we've really enjoyed watching it grow and scale across the state of Texas. And so I'm going to allow for kind of both of our panelists here to give a little bit of an overview to start about the work that they're doing, their organizations, and how they view the topic area. And I'm going to start with Tim at America Succeeds, and then we will go from there. So Tim, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate the opportunity to join you today and share a little bit about the work that we're doing, and look forward to a great conversation. America Succeeds is a Denver-based nonprofit organization. We work at the intersection of workforce, talking to employers about the demands that they have for the talent that they see propelling us into the future. And then we work very closely with both post-secondary and K-12 education institutions to try to align the talent pipeline, fewer leaks, more folks getting from making that transition from learner to earner, and being able to succeed in their local community and contribute to their local community, which typically means that they're employed at some point as well. So we've done a lot of work. We helped popularize the term durable skills with a report that we released back in 2021, the high demand for durable skills, which started with work that we did with a company called Lightcast. And what we did is we analyzed over 80 million job descriptions to look to see how employers referred to these terms. And durable skills, we think of those as how you use what you know, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and then also how you show up in the world. So things like leadership or growth mindset or metacognition. Some people refer to these as soft skills. Employers typically don't love that term. These skills are anything but soft. And what we found is that in actuality, in today's world, 8 of the top 10 most in demand skills from employers are actually these durable skills. And what's happened is we actually see an increase, an uptick in the demand for these skills with the advent of AI. So if everybody has the same AI, then it is actually these durable skills that set you apart. It's how you communicate those skills. It's how you collaborate. It's your judgment as you're using AI. And I think probably everybody in the audience is familiar with an employer who has said, give me somebody who can think critically, collaborate, or has a growth mindset, and we'll teach them what they need to know. I always hope that's not my airline pilot or an engineer building a bridge. But generally, we understand that for the vast majority of jobs, and all jobs are a combination of technical and durable skills, but many jobs, the employer is willing to upskill you on the technical skills, but the durable skills they expect you to have from the jump. And so we find them to be super important and have done a lot of work in that area.
Great. Thank you, Tim. And again, this is, as we've talked about sort of these skill progressions, I think a recurring theme is this idea of how the labor force workforce is evolving as a result of AI, and how do we think about what are those durable skills. So would love to turn it over to you, Dr. Solis, to talk about how you all are viewing and approaching these conversations at Brazos.
Yeah, thank you, Bryan. I think if we can just transcribe everything that Tim said and overlay it on what I'm about to say, it fits right in. I think for us at the college level, what's really significant is preparing students with a 21st century mindset. One of the things that we looked at very closely, Bryan, was how do we prepare students to be successful for their first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh career, because we know that one of the things that is different in the modern learner, and I like to think of the modern learner as everything that the traditional age learner is not. These are individuals that are full-time life managers and seeking their education at the same time. They've got family, they've got responsibilities. And I think that one of the things that higher ed has struggled with is this expectation that they either pick the education or pick a paycheck. And we are always going to lose out to the paycheck because particularly community colleges, the students are working. The vast majority of our students, upwards of 80 plus percent, are working, right? So we understand that the modern learner has different challenges than what we traditionally expect. And I think that to Tim's point, these skills, these soft skills, durable skills, I definitely prefer the term durable skill, simply because it adds that emphasis of how important these are. I would take it a step further, think of these as core essential functions in what we need to be delivering with our graduates. So I think that the best way to process this for our viewing audience and for everyone else that's listening to the conversation is your technical skills that you learn in the classroom are what's going to get you hired. But what's going to keep you hired and what's going to get you promoted and what's going to get you down the path of a successful career are all of these durable skills. So it's more than just delivering the curriculum. You have to really think about what kind of graduate do you want to produce as an institution? What does a 21st century learner look like? More importantly, how are they going to be successful in a rapidly changing environment? AI is driving so much of not just the new kind of work, but it's also displacing a lot of work. If you look at the 50 to 60,000 jobs a month that are being displaced, about a quarter of those are directly related to an AI-specific result of losing that job or transitioning that job. So our students, I think, all have to be very AI literate. They have to have these technical skills that are going to get them in the door. But if they want to stay in that door, and depending on how far down that hallway you want to go, you're going to need these durable skills. And we hear it from our employer connections all the time. Hey, we'll work on the technical pieces, but these durable skills, is something that we all have to be working on. I think that's especially relevant to our partners in K-12. We need to start interjecting these way sooner because I liken these durable skills in this environment to what happens with math skills. A lot of times people show up to the community college lacking some of these essential mathematics skills, and they want us to fix them in a semester. Durable skills are the same way. You can't teach, all the things that are in these top essential things that people are looking for on the employment side in a semester or two. And the modern learner is looking for quick turnaround credentials. So if we're looking at that, you don't have the time that you need to get these things done at that level. So you have to start working with your K-12 partners to really start infusing this messaging early on.
Absolutely agree with that. Tim, I want to kind of like pull you in on some of the conversation there around those durable skills. And, I think one of the things that we have with, we have math, we have reading, we have all of these, kind of core subjects that we have strong assessment to understand where does a student fall on, readiness or preparedness in these areas. How do we start to think about not only defining, but then assessing durable skills that can even give us that baseline so we can start to think about how do we integrate this into a curriculum and where are we, maybe establishing a baseline for learners coming out of the K through 12 system or those who are returning to campuses?
Yeah, great. It's a great question. And about 11 minutes into the conversation is about when you start thinking about assessment, right? It always comes back. It's so important. It's where we start to look immediately because we typically have not assessed for these skills. And I think that's a big piece of it. So one, we've not asked traditional education to deliver and develop these skills. These are typically skills that we've learned outside of the classroom. Sports, music, travel, good dinner table conversation. We develop durable skills in so many different places, but not traditionally in a K-12 or in a post-secondary classroom. They are taught, but they're not explicitly mentioned in the classroom. And I think this is one of the big things that we've identified in our work is that we have to put a name to these skills and we have to be really clear of what our expectations are. And so at America Succeeds, one of the things we've done is we've developed our PathSmith framework, and pathsmith.org is the website where you can find this. And for over 100 terms that employers ask for, we've worked with employers around the country, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Business Roundtable, SHRM, the National Governors Association, and others, to say, well, what do you mean by each of those terms? And what do you expect someone to be able to know and do related to each of those terms? And our PathSmith framework includes a rubric. And that rubric sets up actually content that you can teach to and ultimately then assess. And this is one of the things that's been lacking in this. And so now that framework exists, we're working with a number of partners, community college, Brazosport is one of the leaders in this, of starting to look at how we're able to give students the opportunity to demonstrate that they have these skills. And for employers, the traditional signal has been a 4-year degree. It's been a proxy for durable skills. And I'll note here, it's not necessarily the best proxy, but employers use it as something that somebody can, you probably have some grit. You've probably done some collaboration. I assume you've got a growth mindset, but we're not really sure what a learner can do, even using that proxy. And now as we switch to a lot of skills-based hiring around the country, employers are really struggling. I can see what you can do technically, but I can't see where those durable skills fit. And as Dr. Solis said, your technical skills will get you in the door, but it's your durable skills that'll keep you in the room. And 60% of employers is a great report that you all can find. 60% of employers have recently hired and very quickly fired a Gen Z student because they lack these durable skills in the workforce. And if you miss that first rung on the workforce and that's a mishire, that's got long-term implications for your career ladder as you move forward. So it all just comes back to, and we can really dig in on how we're getting to some of the assessment now and what we're building. But you needed that infrastructure and that baseline before you start to move to those next couple of things and how we teach teachers to deliver it, and then ultimately how we assess. And this movement is really gaining momentum, and some of those things are coming. And I can share a little bit more. That's a teaser for later.
Yeah. And so Dr. Solis would love to hear, sort of how this implementation has went at Brazosport, how you think about this in the lens in particular with some of your continuing education and CE programs too. And really that idea of we're trying to engage the whole campus community in this work, right? And how do we bring the whole community along to think about both technical and durable skills as a part of our offering to learners?
Yeah, I think that, to Tim's point, the piece of this idea that skills are going to pay the bills is really central to that purpose. Because when we talk about the type of graduate that we produce, what do they have that is going to keep them employed and let them move into more enhanced opportunities down the road? So that was one of the things that really drove our strategic planning process. We really thought long and hard about, okay, well, what is the kind of graduate that we want to produce? And I'm going to backtrack a little bit, because kind of what led to the discussions about these issues on our campus. We are very blessed with our industry and business partners, like many institutions are, but we have a very large industry base that supports and fuels the institution in many different ways. A lot of access to really, really great jobs, life-changing wages. The average per capita wage for the county is about $87,000. So there's some really high-paying, life-changing opportunities out there if the students can get in there. We were having a college update to the community. We would bring in community leaders. We're having this luncheon, and we started talking about, okay, what's next on the horizon for the college? And one of the things that one of our biggest partners said, he said, I really want to understand why some of our new employees, and to Tim's point, they're getting hired because they got the technical skills, but they're losing their jobs very quickly at the highest rates of any other group, particularly for the youngest workers. So the question was, and it was more of a comment, but it led to a question. He says, I don't know when new employees are either not coming to work. I don't know if they're calling in sick. I don't know where they are at. They're not communicating. They're not letting us know. And when we finally track them down, they're surprised that we even called to find out where they were at and why they didn't show up to work. That led to a lot of questions. That led to more discussions. That led to us really thinking about, we're doing a really good job with our faculty. We've got small, personalized instruction. We've worked really hard to remove barriers for students. We've looked at flexible scheduling, different options, online pieces, all of these things that we're doing. But at the end of the day, if the student doesn't have these key core functions as tools and levers they can pull, they're not going to be successful in that space. So for us, it started with our strategic planning. Then it really started with an emphasis from the entire executive team, really thinking about how do we infuse this in every single course. And to Tim's point about how do you assess this, you have to build it into your student learning outcomes, right? You have to really think about, what does this mean in the classroom? If you're not assessing, you're not able to determine whether you have the data that's going to demonstrate that you're actually doing this and producing the kind of graduate that business and industry need. But ultimately, what are you doing as an institution to be flexible, to have these stackable credentials? And I think that we also have to take the mindset in higher education, particularly higher learning, is that knowledge and information are essentially valueless at this point, because students have in their pocket access to the world's information in an instant. It's how the institution teaches how to use them, how to be collaborative, how to think critically. I think that there's a lot that goes into that self-leadership that we need to really work with students to determine their drive, what they want to do, goal setting. All these things used to take place in a very non-structured way, but they were taking place either through sports or through what was going on at home. And all these things prior to 2012, when more than 50% of Americans got hooked on the phones, the dynamics really started changing at that point. So for us, it really started with the questions of how do we ensure that the graduates we're producing are going to be successful in that workspace, because ultimately we feed industry and then industry takes care of the community. But it's a symbiotic relationship. If we're not producing the kind of graduates that are going to be successful, they're going to have their challenges. That translates to challenges for the community. So I really think it starts at the top. You have to have an executive team that understands the data. I think you have to stay connected to organizations like Trellis and the work that Tim is doing, because you understand, you see what the data is telling you, but you have to act on that data and take measures in your planning and your strategic planning to really be impactful with what you're doing. And then ultimately setting expectations. This is something that we are going to do. And I will say this, higher education is extremely resistant to change. We understand that. But if you read what's going on in the world of higher education, you read more and more that more institutions are closing. Higher education has become a question mark for a lot of individuals. And we have a responsibility to put what we do in the space that is going to be effective, that individuals are going to walk away with what they need to be successful in, like I said, that first, fifth, sixth, seventh career, because now they got to be lifelong learners. What was once a one-time option for us, getting a degree, We did that for 3 years. We were one and done. Right? That doesn't happen anymore. If you're a new employee to the space right now, you best be prepared to be a lifelong learner to be relevant. And that's important for all of us in the workspace.
I'd love to build on that. I mean, this is fantastic, and really kudos to Brazosport and your leadership of that shift in strategic thinking around what it is that's going to take somebody to transition from learner to earner. And we see this in the community college space particularly, and even more acutely at the continuing education space, right? That transition from learner to earner is tighter in continuing education than it is even through community college. And then certainly 4-year institution, or if you look at K-12, right, that transition is still a ways out. So it's hard to think about the skills that person's going to need. And how does everybody on a campus understand that it is their role to teach both, whether you're a math teacher, you're supposed to teach durable skills, or a science teacher, durable skills, or a welding instructor, you're supposed to teach durable skills. And we have been through the generous support of Trellis Foundation, we have a grant. We brought a dozen community colleges together. And one of my favorite anecdotes to come out of that work was working with some continuing education programs. And somebody said that it's these employers that are really making the case for this. And they say, we stand at the end of the stage when you hand that certificate out to a learner, and the employer says to us, we will hire your worst welder with durable skills over your best welder without durable skills. And you can insert any name or occupation in that sentence. And I think that's the tweet, right? Like that is the punchline of this, is that the demand side is really going to force a lot of our hands in both K-12 and post-secondary on how we respond in today's world when we can hardly predict what the jobs are going to be in the next 2 years, much less the next 10 years. What we've got to produce are young people who can think critically and collaborate and have a growth mindset and are ready to be very agile over the course of their careers, but know that these skills are going to be the anchor that is going to help them. They will bring these skills with them from job to job to job, no matter what the technical skills that they require. I've been in the field of agriculture. I've been in the golf business. I'm now in education. I don't use many of the technical skills from any of those other of those careers, but I use 100% of the durable skills still every day when I show up at work.
Bryan, if I can just make just a couple of comments to segue to what Tim said that I think are really important. One, this concept of the continuing education, I think that is going to be more than just a department that you have at your institution. If you're going to really be successful at this, we have to keep in mind that the modern learner is looking for quick turnaround, flexible schedules. And I think the continuing ed needs to be not only thought of as a department at your institution, I think it really needs to be thought of as part of the infrastructure at the institution. It is going to be that important. I think that having that mindset with your continuing education, people are coming in, they want these skills, they want to be able to upskill, they want to be able to upgrade, continue their progression there. But the continuing ed piece is going to be really, really significant in that space. And I think that any leader at an institution should be looking at their continuing ed space very carefully because the types of service, the type of courses, the type of availability, and it has to be employer-led and driven, right? It has to be with that connection, understanding what is happening in that space so that you deliver those quick turnaround items. And I think you also have to look at the student as a whole. Our modern learners come with a lot of different needs, not just the need to upskill their durable skills and their technical skills, but they're coming in with issues of food insecurities, of needs that they have beyond the classroom. They're balancing family. You have to think of the learner in a very different way than what we, as who came up traditionally, thought of as what a traditional learner is. You still have those on campus that come full time. They're right out of high school. But that dynamic, especially for colleges, has changed significantly and is going to continue. And I think the other piece that I just wanted to mention, Tim talked about the predictability of the jobs that are coming into the space. I think one thing that we all need to wrap our brains around, and it's hard to do because it's hard work. We can't predict what jobs are going to be available. A few years ago, we could say, you know what, there's going to be the need for A, B, or C. And we were pretty confident that we were going to need that. I think if you got the best minds at the table, I think they're all going to come up with different answers about what is going to be needed. So I think that you have to be responsive as an institution to what is happening in that environment. And again, I go back to institutions that are going to thrive in the future are the ones making changes today to workforce, to alignment, to curriculum, to pedagogy. If you're not doing that, you will be left behind as an institution, and as a byproduct, your students will be left behind.
Yeah, Brian, you probably have a question at some point in here, but I'm going to jump on that too. I just want to. I was at an AI summit, and I can't remember. I wish I could credit the person who actually said it, but they said in the age of AI, certainty will be punished and clarity will be rewarded. And I think that just sums up exactly what we're talking about. We have a lot of clarity around the types of skills young people are going to need. We have very little certainty about any of the other ways that things are going to happen. And I think for us to say that this is what's got to happen, to be certain about the types of things that have to happen in the world as it is changing so rapidly, is really going to wind up putting us in the wrong spot. But some clarity around what types of skills young people need and where we're headed with institutions and the way that learning is going to change is really important. So I think it's just, I love that quote, and I've used it a number of times because I think it's so relevant. Anyway, a lot of fun.
No, it is a lot of fun. And just for the audience, the Q&A function as well as the chat function both work for questions, and we'll be more than happy to raise those to our panelists here. I want to, this isn't something that we provided you in advance, but I want to kind of pressure test this. Like, we're talking a lot about the idea of, certainty and clarity. We're talking about shorter duration experiences that people are looking to experience for multiple reasons, right? One, because when you have all the other life components going on, your time to earning is super important, but also because the half-life of skills, in particular, technical skills, is shortening greatly. How do we balance sort of this injection of durable skills into a shorter duration intervention that students are experiencing and still make sure that we're able to give something that is durable, for lack of a better term, right, beyond that the half-life of that intervention? Because I think that's one of the things that we see a lot of tension with is we're going towards shorter and shorter intervention periods. We're still expecting long return windows for these. And how do we kind of balance those two pressure points for learners? And how do we engage faculty and the campus community too in that conversation as well?
Well, I think that from a college side on this, Brian, one thing that's important is that the one-stop workshop is not going to work. We want to solve these problems with the 1 hour workshop. So we did it. Let's check the box. Let's move on. That's a pipe dream. I think that what we need to have as educators is have a strategic vision for what this is going to take, and it's going to be a lift. I go back to the concept that institutions of higher education are built from the ground up to resist change. It is just the way we are wired. It is going to be a challenge for each of us because it is going to be a lot of work. But that, the one-stop shop that, or the one-stop event that student activities is going to host is not going to cut it. It needs to be a part of that, but this needs to be woven into your orientation programs. It needs to be woven into what is happening with your recruitment. It needs to be woven into your classes, your first-year experience course. I think the other thing where there's an opportunity for the community colleges, particularly in Texas, and the ones that are doing a lot of dual enrollment, get to the students early. So while there may be short-term windows for that modern learner, I put those dual enrollment students in that bucket as well because they are transitioning very early into that space. So you have them captured for 4 years. At our institution, roughly half of our students are dual. So they know we've got them for 4 years in that bucket, even though they're working on a 2-year degree. So take advantage of the opportunities that you have in that space, but it has to be a very deliberate approach. And that like I said, that 1 hour workshop, it's but one of many tools, and it needs to be much more deliberate, much more thought out, much more planned, and everybody's got to be on board. And it starts with understanding the data and what is happening in workforce. When we are sending people out into that space and they are not able to retain a job, that's something that we're doing on our end, and it's not in the right way, right? So we have to take onus for that, be responsible for understanding what is needed in that environment for them to be successful, and build it into everything.
Yeah, I'd build on that just by saying, I mean, Dr. Solis, what you're doing at Brazosport, right? It's durable skills are in the water. They're just everywhere, and that is where I think the shift that needs to happen as it relates to sort of how we deliver this. So, You can't. One of my favorites is, you can't think critically about nothing. You have to have and reading, writing, arithmetic still matter. The subject matters still, right? But K-12, they think about everything often in the box of a Carnegie unit. So we had somebody actually at one of our sessions say, with all due respect, there's not enough time to add critical thinking courses throughout the day. And we had a business leader said, look, you can't think critically from 11 to 11:50 and then go to math. These aren't individual subjects, right? We need you doing these skills which is exactly what faculty and staff need to hear. Your subject, your contents are very relevant. And we're not asking you to do more. We're just asking you to do it differently. Think critically about history. Collaborate in math class. Collaborating, I collaborated in math class once and I got in trouble for cheating. Collaboration in math class could look really different. 3 students work on a set of problems. Each student go to the front of the class, present back to the class, practice your verbal communication, your presentation skills, all these things at the same time. And so I think that those are the type of things that systems still need a lot of help and support doing. And I don't even know if there are ways, Dr. Solis, that you and your colleagues are getting together to exchange promising practice. I just think this is still really new. Yes. And there are not enough tools and products and services for the schools to grab as resources to help you in your journey with this. It's got to feel very lonely because the folks we're talking to who are doing it in very small pockets instead of, really learning from one another and getting some fuel in the rocket and accelerating this ride.
Yeah, and I think also, Bryan, I'm going to just, we're doing the pickleball thing, going back and forth with Tim and I, and I know that there's other pieces, but these are important comments that Tim's. I think that as we as an institution, when we looked at this, it's also about how we redirect our resources. So one of the things that was a part of our ethos in really thinking about this was we're spending X number of dollars on A, B, and C. Are A, B, and C still relevant? And I think that's an important discussion to have at your institution because you're going to have to make some difficult choices about where you are going to redirect the resources that are needed to do some of these things. Like, for example, one of the things that we looked at was let's create a part-time nursing program because we know that students have those full-time lives. That part-time nursing program is going to be deployed this fall semester. We know it's already going to be a capacity. But what we did was we also redirected the resources so that those students, you remove the barriers. They don't have to pay for tuition, they don't have to pay for fees, and they don't have to pay for books. We're doing the same with our law enforcement academy. We're doing the same for students in the community, up to 200 slots where they get those barriers removed. They don't have to pay for tuition fees or books, but they do have to put in their time. They have to. The way they compensate them is by being successful in the program. But that means that while we get the hook to them in the classes, our instructors are then working on these durable skills. But as I mentioned earlier, Bryan, it needs to be more than just one concerted item. It needs to be lots of strategies. One of the things that I am looking at, I still haven't fleshed this out completely because this is going to require some resources. But I know that I've got half of the students at the college in dual enrollment. I know that I've got them starting as early as the 9th grade. One of the things that we are looking at is deploying, we still haven't worked everything out because it requires resources, but deploying durable skills coaches, right, that have programs that will actually start getting to them early about teamwork, collaboration, critical thinking, ethical decision-making. And I think the other piece that's out there, that adaptability. If you are not adaptable in this space, you will become irrelevant. And I think that it's not about putting, fear into the students. It's about giving them the tools that they need to be successful in the space where they're supported, they're comfortable. We remove the barriers so that they can focus solely on developing these pieces because it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, that's a really, really great call out. There's a comment kind of in the chat talking about the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, which is a national organization. It's doing great work in providing resources and professional development for the K through 12 space. And so thank you for raising that resource. Tim, you kind of alluded to this too around this isn't just you can't just show up critical think from 11 to 11:50 or show up for one meeting and, be a critical thinker. Part of this, and there's always the need for curricular change, but also the need for change management with humans, right? And how do faculty and staff view their subject as something that we can inject durable skills into? I think, we've seen examples of this with group projects and collaborative learning environments and things that used to be cheating, to your example, that became more of, durable skill in interventions. But are there good examples? I mean, obviously, Brazosport is one that you've seen on campus of really helping to move faculty and staff along in those conversations to see themselves as a part of this solution.
Yeah, so one of the ones that I would mention is Brandeis University, which is a 4-year institution that Art Levine is the president of Brandeis, and he's getting some national recognition for what he's thinking about and doing at Brandeis. So his great line is that he believes that every student at Brandeis should have one foot in the library and one foot on the street. And they should be thinking about how they are going to leave a liberal arts university with enough content to get the job. And he took over Brandeis recently, I'll say. I don't know exactly how long ago, but before he took it over, one of the things he said is, we're going to deliver durable skills all day, every day, in every single classroom. And the only way I'll take the job is if the faculty agrees to that. And he had one-on-one conversations with 150 faculty, whatever the number was. And then they had a blind vote to say, if before he takes the job, is the faculty bought into that idea? And he said he had over 80% faculty buy-in. And he said, I don't have 80% faculty buy-in on what day of the week it is, for much less than 80% buy-in that they're going to move towards durable skills. But here's a 4-year liberal arts university where the faculty recognize that if they are not delivering something that the students want, that's going to help them get jobs and get them placed into careers, that their very existence is going to be threatened. And so this is where it's just a complete overhaul. And the leadership, and particularly at a 4-year institution, I'll give them a lot of credit for that. What Dr. Solis is doing is, in a very compressed time, that he's recognizing this at an institution like that is really noteworthy. And I think that one of the things that has to happen is it's really got to catch on. One of the things that he is doing, which I think is fascinating, and would love to work with everybody on this call on some level, he is creating a durable skills transcript that goes along with your academic transcript. And his belief is everybody ought to leave with both transcripts to take to whatever you're going to go do next. Sort of a page 2 on the transcript, or however we want to think about that. And I think that that's a fascinating idea, because signaling to an employer how young people develop skills, and very quickly, right? If you're only looking at a resume, and now AI is looking at most resumes, but if you actually get to a person, how do you signal these durable skills in the 6 to 8 seconds, the average time somebody looks at a resume? It's got to start getting a lot faster. And so these are the types of ideas that I think are really going to push us forward.
And Brian, if I may, I think that that's a really good point on the transcript component, because once you kind of figure this out at the institutional level, there are already mechanisms on the transcript software to do co-curricular listings, but you can just convert those into either different kind of badging or statements regarding the soft skills that they've developed. So as I mentioned, it's not a one size fits all. You're going to have to try a lot of different things. I think the other thing that's really, really important is support the faculty and staff. If there are opportunities for them to get involved with development, with training, but also support and understand that faculty and staff at this environment that is constantly changing, we're always asking different things of them. You have to be supportive of the faculty. You have to be supportive of the staff through more than just the things like training. Be supportive of them where possible. I understand budgets are tight, but really focus on where you're spending the dollars so that you can also shift resources into compensation, right? Compensation, if they're worried about compensation and they're worried about other things, that doesn't always allow you to focus on these other things that are more in those spaces. So do everything that you can for your faculty and your staff. I think what's also important is faculty, I think, respond best when it is when the ideas are germinated from the faculty. You just have to give them that leeway to do the work, because they're already doing really great work. I'm really proud of our faculty and our staff. They all work very, very hard. They're diligent about their students. If you talk to the students about the institution, they're going to tell you that they enjoy that engagement piece. And in fact, one of the things that we're seeing is more students requesting, of all things, in-person courses, right? So there was this huge shift to everything goes online. It's about convenience. People want to do that. And now we're seeing more students. Can we get more in-person classes? And we're really blessed that we've got some amazing faculty members, many of them throughout. So connecting them to the teacher and the student is really important. That's why in the same way that CE piece needs to be more than the department, needs to be part of the infrastructure, advising needs to be in the same kind of wheelhouse. It needs to be part of the overall approach that you have with the students. That advising needs to be more than scheduling. Advisors need to really understand how it connects to the world of work. It goes to understanding what the employer is needing. So the faculty have to stay focused on the pedagogy, what's being taught in the curriculum, and they have to be responsive to change that on a regular basis. That's another space. You have to change your curriculum to what is happening with your industry partners, and you have to stay connected to them. The idea of having a once-a-year advisory committee meetings for the particular technical programs, that doesn't work. You got to do them on a more regular basis. You have to give your faculty the leeway to go out into business and industry, develop those partnerships, talk to the industry leaders so they can get a sense, okay, what do we need to build in our curriculum and adjust as the space is adjusting. You got to give them that leeway and those resources, and they'll do a great job for you.
Let me throw in a plug with that, because I love where this landed. But if there are folks on this call who are interested in the idea of a transcript and want to work with a group of employers on the demand side and a group of other institutions that want to think through this, we would love to be at the center of that and host and facilitate and do some of the research behind that. So if that resonates with anybody in the audience, please reach out either to Trellis or to America Succeeds. We'd be thrilled to find out if there's a coalition of the willing there who wants to move that idea forward.
Tim, can I ask it? And I don't really know how to frame this, so I'm just going to say it. You maybe respond to it, Dr. Solis, as well. So we have industry in this conversation as a receiver of talent, right? And then we have kind of the institution as, kind of curating and moving the talent through and creating the transcript. We also know that upwards of 70-80% of our students are working while they're enrolled, back to the part-time nursing program and those types of things. And so where does that kind of middle ground of skills that are being acquired through employment, right? We talk a lot about work-based learning as a high impact practice, but when many of our students, not all, but many are working, how do we kind of create that bridge? And is the institution an assessor of those durable skills? Is it what's the role of that employment experience, I guess, that's often going along with the curricular experience for many of our modern learners?
Yeah, I think, and I'm just as Tim gets into this piece, I think one component for us, Brian, that's really important is that we are developing for the fall semester a student employment initiative, and what that is going to do, it's going to pay students $20 an hour, and it is not focused on an office job per se. We've got runners, we've got work studies, we've got the gopher type of jobs. That is not this. These 20 positions that we are piloting are going to be for students that want to focus on a particular industry, right? Somebody wants to go into financing. We're doing 2 of those positions with one of our local banks. The rest are going to be on campus in HR, the president's office. For example, the one that I'm going to use is all going to be focused on how do you manage the social media of the CEO, because I'm terrible at that, but I know that someone with those skills, and I think what's important with the skills that we got to give them is knowing what the technology does is not the same thing as knowing what the technology can do. And I think that when we're looking at our curriculum and how we deploy those pieces, you have to be smart about the kinds of programs that we deploy. And that experience that the students are going to get is all about durable skills. So the reason we're investing $20 an hour is because we don't want them going to go work somewhere else when they can work on campus. We work with their schedules. They're going to be assigned to that mentor coach model while they're doing that. And that program's going to take off. I'm real confident in that. But what we want them to gain from that is not just what's happening in the classroom with our faculty, but working with the vice president of HR, working with the president's office, working with Tim, or working with Brian, or wherever that is going to be on campus, so that they are in a deliberate way learning the skills that they need, communication, presentations, all the things that are soft baked into that. our heart baked into that for these soft skills, with the underlying premise that we will monitor, and then we're going to expand that program. And the reason that we're doing the $20 an hour is so that they don't go somewhere else, right? Because you can go make $18 down the street at one of our convenience stores, but we want these students to learn more than here's how you run a cash register, right? You want to learn these other skills, because these are the types of skills, as Tim mentioned, that are going to allow you to get promoted, that are going to get you to a better job, more pay, a better career. The rest of the technical things, you're going to have to change those out, especially in this environment, every 2 to 3 years. So there's going to be that self-leadership component that we also have to teach our students, because they're going to have to be driven to do those things, because if not, they will become irrelevant very quickly in that work environment.
Yeah, I'll build on that. I think of this in two ways. So for younger learners, right, one of the big catch-22 that everybody's familiar with, right, is that you need some experience to get a job, but you can't get experience until you get a job, right? So like the early career, that's a real thing. And when you see companies cutting back on entry-level positions, this becomes a real factor in getting young people into the workforce. So yes, every student, the more students that can have a work-based experience, the better, because it's a great place to practice your durable skills. You see them in real time. We want more students to have that. Of course, we know there's limitations to the number of companies that are willing to take folks in and have these work-based experience. Project-based learning is a great way to experience some of these types of things. For the older workers, right? The average age at community colleges, I realize, is older, mid-30s, I believe, if I'm close to that number. But so many of them have already been in jobs and experienced a lot of this. The opportunity, I think, for them is to upskill and figure out what durable skills do I have and which don't I have that are holding me back. And that's a really interesting conversation to have when they're coming back into the institutions, is you have developed some durable skills or you wouldn't be keeping that job. But there are probably others that you might not have developed along the way. We work with a company called Nemo, and Nemo uses, it's an AI tool, and you have a conversation with the screen, much like we're having right now. And it will put you in work-based scenarios and situations, and they're built around specific jobs or experiences. So you could be on a factory floor, or you could be at the front desk of a hotel. And it will give you an experience. So a shift handoff at a GM factory floor, and I come in and my colleague is saying, I've got to go get my kids. I'm late. I got to go pick up my kids. And you say, well, I'm relatively new. How did that shift go? Is there anything I should know about? Well, yes, an alarm bell went off, but I got to go get my kids. Well, the practicing of it, well, which alarm bell went off? Who do I contact if that alarm goes off again? GM is using this to shorten downtime during a shift handoff. The tool then gives back to the employee and to the manager a little printout of here's how you handled the technical skills of the job, and here's how you handled the durable skills during that situation. Good problem solving, good questioning. And you actually have this role playing that is saying, here's what you have to practice, here's what you did well, in real-time feedback. And I think getting kids to practice this in education settings and other types of settings, like giving them those types of things, is hugely important in both initially getting them into the workforce and in upskilling them for roles where they're going to need it and want to grow.
Hey, Brian, I think the other piece that'll be really important, as particularly on the education side, as you're working with students, the younger group, the modern learner on the dual enrollment side, if they understand, the earlier the better, for all students, but the competitive advantage that they have in this environment, if you've got these 9, 10 durable skills locked in, it makes you so valuable to that organization. And to Tim's point, that's what they're going to keep those individuals on. So if they recognize that early, and that's part of the messaging, I think that it gives them that incentive to really kind of barrel down and say, yeah, I think that this is something that I need to really focus on, which is very different from the way we were raised, right? We also have to understand that we cannot apply our lens to what is happening with students that are learning this right now. It just two very different environments, pre-2012 and post-2012. So I think that we need to think about it in that way, is that we can't apply our lens and our way of working on it with what the students are dealing with now.
Let me give one other really actionable piece for the audience too, because I think sometimes instead of it being, having something you can actually touch or feel, there's another company called Project Set that is out there. And what Project Set does is creates projects for the classroom. So a teacher could go in and select a project, and then what all of the content is uploaded through the Project Set management tool. And it looks for both the technical and durable skills that you're practicing. What's really cool is that Project Set allows you to work with one of your employer partners, and you can actually take a job description from one of your employer partners, upload it into Project Set, and it creates projects for your students based on a specific job description. So for teachers in the classroom, this does a lot of those types of things for you, and it's looking for durable skills and getting feedback for the students while they're doing the types of projects. And these can be group projects or individual projects. Pretty cool because they're employer-led, and it allows you to get to that scale a little faster because you don't have to go to dozens of companies. So there's more things coming on the market that are really going to start to help the classroom teachers and professors who want to deliver this kind of content.
Bryan, I think the other piece on that is a tangible takeaway. There's a really great AI tool, and I know that this is ironic because a lot of these disruptions are taking place because of the technologies, but there is a tool for the online learning space called Harmonize that really is a really great tool for teachers to really work with the software to integrate in their courses and ask really engaging questions, particularly in the online space. The online space is hard to get that kind of level of engagement. But that tool really allows you to develop and craft some amazing questions that really get to the core of that engagement piece. I think that engagement component is really critical to all these other pieces as they develop, because if you can get a student engaged, you can get them communicating. If you get them engaged, you can get them thinking critically about different things. You can have them work on projects related to ethics, goal setting, teamwork, collaboration. The engagement piece is really, really important in the process. And if there's different approaches that teachers and staff can use in that space, it's but another tool to help them be successful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And love the enablement, right? This is kind of the double-edged sword of AI, right? It's rapidly changing how we experience the workforce, but it's also enabling us to deliver and train in really interesting ways. We just have a couple of minutes left. I'd love for both of you to just provide any closing thoughts that you have for campuses in terms of how to take this and actually implement it. And we've talked a lot about everything from faculty engagement to assignments and curriculum and employer engagement and all of those pieces. But if there were one or two tangible pieces of advice for sort of where to start for many of our campuses, I think that might be great. And then anything else that you'd like to add sort of in closing. But thank you both so much for your time today.
I think the one takeaway, at least for me on the leadership side, Bryan, is that relevance that we've had for so many years of being providers of higher learning is going to require in the future reimagination of our services. So if we want to remain relevant as an institution of higher learning, and I'm not just talking about our particular, I'm talking about higher ed as a whole, it's going to require reimagination and a commitment to working through strategies, innovative measures, program services that are different. I think that you have to have something that is going to work with different populations of students, but I think it requires a lot of thinking. It requires a lot of strategizing. And I think the other thing that's really, really important is that the strategic planning process that is done in higher education, I think is obsolete. I'm not a fan of it because it goes through a very rigid cycle. And I think that when it's done really, really well, you're responding to the environment in much quicker ways. So you have to be strategic thinking, not just planning. The planning piece is easy. You put together a document that sits on a shelf somewhere. Nobody's going to see it until the president asks, hey, where are our measures? Where's your data? We all know how that works. I think that for leadership, you really need to be focused on the strategic thinking piece, because if you don't reimagine what the future can look like, we lose our relevance as an institution. So that provider piece is so critical to workforce, to industry, and above all to the students that are coming to our doors looking for the tools and the skills that they need to develop to be successful. So they're not just showing up because they've got nothing else to do. this quest that they have in education. It knows it gets them to a better place, but we need to do our part. Our students are not asking us to do things differently, but I think that they want us to do better. I think that they want us to be that flexible, looking at the space, meeting them where they are. The old traditional 16-week model that was based on an agricultural calendar. If you ask people on campus, well, why is it a 16 calendar? They're going to say, well, I'm not sure. And it goes back to something as archaic as an agricultural calendar, right? So we need to be relevant, and the way that we remain relevant is to reimagine what the future can look like and be constantly thinking of it. You have that responsibility as a leader at your institution. All of us do, whether you're in the role of a staff, a faculty member, the CEO, a vice president, whatever it may be. We have responsibilities to constantly be thinking about this because our students are counting on our expertise.
Yeah, I'll start. It's hockey playoff season, and the Avs and the Dallas Stars are in this. So I'll use a Wayne Gretzky quote, right? You've got to skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is. And for our inspiration, we look to Dr. Solis and places like Brazosport that are starting to do things very differently. And I think that what is at the root of that is that we have to identify what the modern learner wants, and then start providing that experience. So we've seen in K-12, the equivalent of this is that there's a lot of portraits of a graduate that districts and states have adopted. And these portraits of a graduate tend to say, of course, reading, writing, arithmetic, the table stakes, but then most of the rest of the things that are in a portrait of a graduate are durable skills. And if we want young people to develop both of those things, the time that we use while we have them in the classroom has to be spent differently, or they will never look like that portrait. So we've put these beautiful portraits of what we think a learner should look like out into the world, and then we're not changing, or if we are not changing, how we spend their time and their day and the way that we're teaching them, then we've got a real disconnect. And I think that when we see the really great models of this at Brazosport and other places around the country, they're changing the way that the student is experiencing school, and they will look different than the way that the traditional learner has looked. And I think that is the piece, and that is so much easier said than done. I know that this is very, very difficult work, and it's easy for me to say these types of things. But there are enough tools and resources and examples out there that you're not going to be first, right? So follow in the footsteps of the folks who have taken this on and who have done really good work.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for not only joining us today, but also being leaders in that really great work, right? And continuing to push forward these conversations on behalf of students and learners everywhere. I think one thing that is incredibly true, to Dr. Solis's point, is that we are going to have a lot of change, and that static strategic plan is not going to be the way that we're going to be able to skate to where the puck is going. As a tortured Penguins fan, the last two games have been better than the first three, but I think we are really, really encouraged by the work that you all are doing to help to kind of recreate what that portrait of a learner looks like, and make sure that we're positioning our institutions locally as purveyors of those skills and continuing to be that trusted partner for whatever the workforce holds moving forward. So thank you all so much for joining us and for the work that you do day in and day out. We really, really appreciate it. Wishing everybody a great rest of the week that joined us here today. And thank you for your interest in the topic. We will send out a recording, so please feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues on campuses and within organizations. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.